as our attendees so far start to arrive. We had a decent number of registrations, so hopefully everyone's just a little bit late today.
Can we see the numbers? Oh, that's right.
They're starting to come through now. So guys, as usual, we will wait a few minutes just for a couple of minutes for everybody to come in and join us. And there'll be some stragglers. But because we are recording this session, it will be known for all the world forever via the wonderful little medium of YouTube. So we're going to, we've got some live attendees today, but then hopefully a whole bunch of people are going to be watching afterwards to figure out.
My nose off screen.
What?
You're not live yet. You're not recording this yet, are you?
We've been recording you the whole time, Ali Barr. You should know that by now.
That's why I went over there. So you're introducing us, yeah?
I probably could. We'll do that.
I don't have to.
I will let you guys do that, but we'll just give everyone a few minutes to click and join in before we kick off. So it shouldn't be too much longer, and I'll let you guys loose. Again.
How long do you want to go for?
Oh, we'll go for as long as you guys have got, but no more than sort of 40 to 50 minutes, I'd say. 50 minutes is usually the time frame that we want to put on it. Clearly,
we'll have to get some interpretive dance lined up in case we run out of things to say.
I like how you two have you've actually sat next to each other, but you're coming in on different cameras, and it does look, it's very Brady Bunch how you're like looking to the left and then looking to the right.
Well, we did one yesterday, which was awful. We were both on the same screen. It was just awful. Yeah, just looked awful.
Well,
so this way,
hopefully it was for his thing.
Hopefully this
one. Well, there's a practice run. But I could sit on the other side of the room and look at you, and that would look good.
Yeah, but lighting.
I think it works well how we've got it. So, guys, what we've obviously everyone's either decided they're not going back to school, or everyone is already 100% legit, apart from you, me, Daniel, and Eddie, who have decided to join us live on this one. So hopefully a few more people jump in, and then we'll be the only legit ones going around. So we might kick off with just a very quick introduction to our two wonderful webinar hosts today. I will be, Eddie's already joked they're already at school, which is probably pretty funny. Nice, Eddie. I like that. A bit of Friday afternoon humour. We are kicking off, and today's conversation's all about getting ready to go back to school. So look, even if you're not joining us live, it doesn't matter. The reality is a big chunk, and I'm sure these boys are going to know the actual numbers, but a huge chunk of the Australian financial advisor force is going to have to go back to school in one way, shape or form to, I suppose, get legit and then stay legit from January 2024 onwards. And we do have a whole bunch of international advisors that, one, regularly join up for our webinars, but two, watch them on replay. And I've spoken to a lot of US advisors in particular who are very interested in what's happening down under. Quite, in all honesty, quite happy that we live down here and not them right now. So, you know, I think you two are internationally recognized as two of the greatest minds when it comes to all things education related. If for no other reason than you tell it like it is and you keep it real and you help those of us out in advisor land make really good and informed decisions around what our choices are, what our options are, what we should do, and how the heck we go about it. So without further ado, I'm going to do what I do worst, which is shut up, and hand over to the all singing, all dancing Alisdair Barr from Grad Mentor. Ali, wave and say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
And the Forza Juve, Benjamin Marshann, a massive Juve fan, and obviously in his part-time, one of, I'm going to call them the elite operators out of FPA Australia. what are you, head of policy, and your title keeps getting bigger, mate. Is it head of policy and
Standards.
There we go. But obviously, we all know and we love him as the voice, one of the voices of the FPA. So, and welcoming Benjamin Marshann to the webinar today.
Benji's fine. Just call me.
Well, I can call you Benji then. So, Benji, who are we kicking off with today? We're going to kick off with you. We're going to kick off with Ali because we've got about 50 minutes to help all our current financial advisors in the Australian market get their heads around how the heck do we do this going back to school and education thing.
Yeah, so I thought I would kick off and set a little bit of the background and stuff, and then Ali is an expert at uni, so I thought I'd let him handle all the how-to stuff. So I'll give a little bit of a idea of where we are, where we're going, what we need to think about. And then Ali will step in, and then I think at the end I'm going to go through some tools and stuff to talk about what the FPA is doing to support our members, but also maybe answer the question you've been asking, Steve, which is how much education do I still need to do?
Very good. Now, given our, you guys had some polls there, but given we've got a very small but engaged crew today, I'm not quite sure how much we're going to get from the poll. So I think what we're going to do, rather than do the live polling today, I'm going to send the two poll questions that Benji and Ali put together. I'm going to fire that out to our broader followers and members, and I think I'll collect that data for you guys, get it back to you as fast as possible, and then we might get each of you just to record a real quick sort of 30-second, 60-second take on what you think those results actually mean, and you might be able to just chuck that up in the Facey group for us.
We could probably use those questions as a talking point now anyway, those poll questions anyway.
Yeah, if you want to. So rather than maybe putting the poll up, you've got those questions on your end, or do you want me to bring them up for you?
Maybe we can bring them up when we get going a bit.
All right. So have you got some slides you want to bring up, Ben?
Yeah, no worries. So we're obviously talking primarily about FASEA here and this FASEA standard and what everybody has to do. So I usually get asked when things need to be done by, what do I need to do, how's this all going to work? So I've just got two slides here to just try and summarize it all. Number one is the timeline. So effectively from January this year, two of the standards came into force. The first one being the PY year. So anybody who wasn't a financial planner by the end of last year needs to meet the new education standard and to come into the profession, they need to be supported through a professional year. That means they'll be supervised, monitored, coached, and get a lot of support coming into the profession. Some of us got that when we were coming in. Others I know just get sat at a desk and asked to start seeing clients. So that support mechanism is really good. The one that's taken a lot of people by surprise, though, is that the CPD standard was meant to start at the beginning of your normal CPD years, but the way the FASEA drafted the legislative instrument, the CPD year actually starts immediately. Will start on the 1st of January. The first thing we all need to do is by the 31st of March, our licensees need to have a CPD policy in place, and then individually, all of us need to have our own individual CPD plans in place by the 31st of March, which by my reckoning is about 9 days away.
Yeah.
So not too far. The next thing that we all need to have done is by the 15th of November 2019, we all need to have signed up to a code monitoring scheme. This one might take people a bit by surprise, in that because everybody's worried about exams and education, the code of ethics has kind of slipped under the radar a little bit. And for me, this is one of the big sleeper issues, that we're all going to need to comply with this new FASEA code of ethics from the 1st of January 2020. But even before that, we need to have signed up to a code monitoring scheme by the 15th of November this year. So this is something the FPA is working with a lot of the other professional associations around financial planning to build a code monitoring scheme that's built by practitioners for practitioners to to be there to support you going forwards. So
is that something you guys are doing in conjunction with others?
Yeah, so we're working with, so FPA is working with AFA, Self-Managed Super Fund Association, Stockbroker and Financial Advisors Association, FINCIA.
Yeah, good. So there'll be a solution there for people to join.
Yeah, and so that should be available basically for everybody. The big one everybody's worried about, and I think Ali's going to talk about some study tips for this one, is the exam. We need to sit and pass the exam by the 31st of December 2020 next year. And then basically we go on three years further than that to the end of 2023, we need to meet the education standards. And so the question I've been getting for the last 3 years is, how does the study I've done in the past count, and what do I have left to do? So I just want to move forward one slide. And so I've built this. There's a lot of confusion. If you read FASEA's standards, it can be a little bit tricky to tell exactly what study I need to do. So I've tried to simplify this, and I'll show a tool later on which you can use if you're an FPA member. But effectively, you fall into one of 4 larger categories. So there's those with no degrees, there's those with non-relevant degrees. So for example, I've got a science degree, or it could be an arts degree, medical degree. There's those with relevant degrees. Relevant degrees are things like commerce and accounting, where you've done majors in things like economics, finance, financial planning, accounting, tax, law.
Okay, but asking this, there's no definition around relevant degree though, is it?
No, so the definition of relevant degree is that it's a degree and that it's got at least 8 units in relevant areas of study.
So that doesn't include psychology, or so it's kind of, but it's not outlined anywhere.
Yeah, it's actually lined in FASEA's legislative instrument.
Okay, what relevant is?
So there's 8 relevant types of study. So finance, economics, they're there.
No, economics, finance, okay, accounting,
yeah. Law.
So law's in there.
Law's in there,
yeah,
but not psychology.
No.
So the definition of this one is if you've done 8 units within those approved areas, and then there's the approved degree category. Now, the approved degree category confuses a lot of people. The approved degrees are the ones that FASEA has actually released on a list, and last time I counted, I think there was 124 of them. So these are degrees that FASEA has actually assessed, well, with the help of the FPA, that actually have effectively financial planning majors within them. They're either financial planning degrees specifically, or they got financial planning majors in them. If you don't have one of the degrees that's listed there, that's okay. You are most likely in this relevant degree category. So you don't have to have an approved degree, relevant degree category. So once you figure out which of those 4 effectively degree levels you're in, FASEA then allows you to take additional units of study off depending on what other specific financial planning study you've done. And so that falls into 3 categories. So if you've done an ADFP, an Advanced Diploma in Financial Planning, or the DFP 1 to 8 that the FPA used to run, where you've got no degree or a non-relevant degree, you get 2 units of credit. So where you would have had to done 8 units, so a graduate diploma, yeah, you only have to do 6 of those 8 units, and you meet the standard. Where you've done a further approved certification, so these are things like the Certified Financial Planner course or the Chartered Financial Advisor, Certified Chartered. Steve, you might jump in and get the right terminology there for me.
The AFA is
where you've done one.
Yes, AFA, FCHFP, the Fellow Chartered Financial Practitioner.
That's the one. Sorry, fellow was the word I couldn't remember. I apologise for that. You get a further 2 units of credit. So if you've done an advanced diploma and a CFP, then rather than having to do 8 units of study, you'll only need to do 4. And so that works through all of these these categories. The difference being where you have a relevant degree, you actually get 3 units of credit for either the Advanced Diploma or DFP 1 to 8 or the certification course.
Benji, on that one though,
and so basically that will, sorry?
There was a demarcation point for FC, and could be, I could just be representative of the entire advisor force and not knowing the answer to this, which is appalling and probably completely normal for me. But is it true that there was a cutoff point, like the old FCHFP wasn't going to count, but the new one does? And is that the same for the old CFP doesn't count, but the new one does?
No. So what happened is in FASEA's release that's here, FPS 001, they've used examples at this point. And so they've said basically, for example, FCHFP from 2015 or CFP 1 to 5, which FPA has run since 2007. Those may be approved certifications, but everybody's had to apply for their certifications to get approved by FASEA. So the FPA has actually got 4 applications in with FASEA at the moment for a variety of CFP programs. And my assumption is AFA will apply for FCHFP from as early as it's run if they are able to map it accurately to FASEA's requirements.
Okay, cool.
And so the point I want to make about that is that because none of the approved certifications have yet been approved, there is a discrepancy with some of the universities saying, well, that's actually not an approved certification, so we're not going to give you credit yet. So we're actually recommending to FPA members just hold off at the moment to apply to education institutions for these, to go into these programs, because the final credit standing hasn't been sorted out by FASEA yet. So we're hoping that by June we'll have some firm answers in place, but right now, because nothing's been announced as being approved, you're not getting all the credit that you might otherwise be entitled to.
So it might save you time in the long run anyway.
Yeah, so you don't want to be enrolling in 2 extra units of study that you don't have to be doing and getting those done because FASEA hasn't yet put out their approved list, and therefore universities aren't actually taking that into account yet.
Frustrating situation.
It is a frustrating situation, and some of you might be aware that because I've for a lot of this time been anyone who's actually had any answers to questions. I've got hiccups for 4 days straight last year because we were waiting for so many answers. So yeah, it's very frustrating we don't have those answers. We are getting closer and closer to having the full set of answers. Good. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background to what's going on. I'm actually going to show you a tool that we've built that helps answer which category you fall into and how many units you sit into, but I might do that after we've had a bit of a discussion about what it's like going back to uni and
that's
stuff. So I'll let Ali talk for a bit.
Yeah, we can have a muck around with that. I'm happy for that to start. I don't have a slide. So what I thought I'd do here was just talk a little bit around, the easy guide to going back to school, and obviously I work with lots of businesses, and lots of most of the work we do is getting new entrants in, so the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 21, 22-year-olds that love going to study, and but I have in the past gone back to university to do an MBA as a mature age student, or a return to education. Also, through that period, studied whilst working a fairly full-on corporate job doing an MBA. And so some of the things that sort of came out of that. So I want to cover some techniques around time management and how to approach study and things like that. And I think, Ben, you can add some banter there because I know you've done the same thing. So this is more practical stuff. But then some study techniques and then who to choose from university. I'm not going to say who to choose, but just sort of what things to look for, because I think everybody's different, and I don't think it's a one-size-fits-all. And there are obviously how many different degrees you said on this list, but I think there's sort of 18 university and education providers on there providing different sorts of degrees and qualifications and grad bits and so forth that will all go through the approval stage eventually. So let's start with that, because that might sort of get to some of the techniques. So from if you're sitting there going, I need to go back to get further education, and we've gone through this exercise here, but let's say you need to go and do 4 units somewhere, just to keep it easy. And there's various different providers that are on the panel. I think the most important thing to do is think about where you're at and what you're doing and what your day-to-day life is. Because I know that if I had to go and do a certain amount of education, I need to work out there's only so many hours in a day. So what's important to me? How do I like to study? What my time frames are and so forth. So if I was thinking right now, I have a young family, and what works for me is I have a routine in the way I work, and I get up early, and then I do sort of an hour block in the morning where no one's running around the house crazy or anything. I can get really focused, and then I can go off and spend some time with the family, then go to work, and then I get bogged down in the day and on life goes. And I think we all run businesses and we all have jobs and things like that. So whatever works for you. So for me, I would, if I were going back to the study approach, I'd say, right, I need to spend 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week, reading text or watching webinars or watching content that's going to help me with my learning. I would choose to do that in a time where I'm fresh and I'm clear and I have no distractions. But for me, that would be first thing in the morning before the world wakes up. Whereas you, Ben, we had this chat yesterday when you did the same thing. You were post dinner, everyone's gone to bed. I can spend an hour and have some time where you don't get distracted and you can actually focus.
Yeah, so I'm a renowned procrastinator.
Yeah.
And so for me, doing things at night time allows me to procrastinate all day and actually spend the time at night getting done what I need to get done. So I tend to work best between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. at night.
And so that works really well for some people, whereas if I'm getting distracted, I'll end up reading a whole paragraph of something or watching something content and then going, I can't remember what I was just watching because I've been distracted and so forth, so I'll have to go back to read. So the first bit is understanding which way you tend to absorb information better, and then how does that fit into your time management. And we all have busy schedules, and I don't think anybody's sitting there going, oh, I have all this spare time, let's go and spend some of that time studying. So that's the first thing, I think, and then how you like to learn. So I mentioned there webinars, I mentioned the video content, and I'm doing an online course at the moment, so that's probably an interesting, also relevant thing. And so I'm watching content on a video in my own time, and then I have to go off and do practical examples, and then they give me downloadable reading. So the reading has taken me 3 times longer because I have to keep going back and reading it because I get distracted and I try and do it on the bus, to when I can sit there and absorb content. So how do you like to learn? So the second bit is how do you like to learn? Some people like video, some people like reading, some people like highlighting, whatever that might be.
Some people might like actually going in and listening to somebody speak in front of them in a theatre.
Yeah, so that's the next one. And I think looking back at the study that I did when I was working in the corporate world, I started off really enjoying the Tuesday night lectures from 6 to 9, where I could go there and sit in there with 20 people and you were learning and so forth. And I knew it was done, and I knew it happened, even if I didn't go and do all the extracurricular hours. Because they might say you need to do 10 hours on top of the 3 hours you do during the course, but realistically that doesn't really happen. You might have done that, but I certainly didn't put in the hours after that I needed to do. So going to class was a really, really structured way of doing that and forced me to do it. So yeah, I agree. So that's another way. So whichever way you like to do it, and whether it's a combination of these. So you need to, when you're selecting your provider, do they have face-to-face? Do they have video content? Do they have webinars? But also, do they have a digital delivery too, right? Because I know that we're all busy. If I was going to do it at 4 or 4:30 in the morning, I know that there's no universities open at that time. So is there a virtual ability? I've seen somebody recently do a master's out of Cambridge in the UK, and they had this virtual global classroom that was going the whole time. And so what is it that works for you? Do you have contact? But that sort of leads me to a bit of the study too, right? So one is how you you're absorbing the content and doing it in your own time, because I know that no one that's going back to school has got chunks of daytime to just go and spend the lectures, or not many would. But one of the things that was, so in my particular MBA, we had some core units, and then we did the strategic year bit. And I was telling Ben the other day, so in the strategic year, it was a full year with 4 courses, and we had these sleep-ins. So we'd go away and we'd do 13 weeks of content that we'd self-learn, and there'd be some group stuff, and we'd do that, digitally, or we all meet up in a coffee shop or something. But then we'd go and spend 5 days on campus sleeping in, and we got work from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, 5 days in a row. Now, not suggesting that's the right amount of time, but what it was that was really condensed and intense learning. And whether or not, you can really focus on, a lot of us are going back to school, right? So making sure we know who's going back to school, in what format, when you're doing it, and getting study peers, and actually maybe going and doing a half-day crash course together where you can all sit down and you can spitball and think tank the content.
Yeah.
I find that a really handy way to learn. And one of the conversations I've had at every sort of function, or every time I speak to any really experienced advisor, is there's bits in here that I'm going to have to go and study, which are going to add no value to my day-to-day work. But if you're actually sitting there talking to other practitioners about the content, about the study, then you might actually learn some things going through that process, not necessarily from the content of the education, but from the application of that in business from one of your peers. So I think study groups is my argument there, and face-to-face study groups where you can say, right, on a Saturday morning, we're going to go and spend 2 hours, or whatever it might be, however you want to roll with it. But I think making sure that you study in groups is a really, really valuable thing.
Yeah, so I did a Masters of Commerce in Financial Planning, which is one of the approved courses as it's now turned out. But we had a study group of about 10 of us who, through the 2 years that it took to get through, we used to all come together on maybe 2 or 3 times a semester, particularly when assignments were starting to come up to be due, or to prepare for exams, and we would sit down and spend half a day together, or spend the evenings studying, talking, making sure we all understood the material. And I still have a good interaction with a lot of those people who are in that study group, and I still bounce ideas off them, and they're a bit of a support network. So it's really good to find peers and people you can do that with.
Yeah, I think that's just a no-brainer. The more I think about that, that was kind of like, I think back to the first core units where I used to really like going to classes, and then I certainly probably didn't invest the time. It forces you to invest time in it. Like, whichever education provider you choose, they're going to say, here's the amount of contact hours you're going to have, and here's the amount of offline stuff you're going to have to do. And to me, I was always a bit undercooked on that. But when you go and do the study groups, you force that time, and it's really rich learning. Yeah. So I think a lot of people are going to go through this together, so you may as well go through it together in good study groups.
So one of the things I'd throw in with that is, I agree 100%. I mean, I know when I initially went to uni, was probably too young to value that. And then as I got older, that might be why I'd never got through uni, got halfway through and went and got a real job and decided I liked money. And in finance, as we all know, sort of 20 years ago, showing my age, you didn't need a degree to be any good. So off you go, and that was it, right? But then as I got older and I knew I needed to get more study, and I did the advanced diploma, that was sort of easy to get through without needing a study group. I think most advisors would agree with that, because that is quite technical learning. And there's not a lot in a study group that you're going to get, I think, from more of a technical based content, unless it is like really difficult stuff, and then you've got someone that you can bounce stuff off with. But for me, the value of the study group when I did FCHFP was, I'm now a practitioner. I'm not doing this as my, to get a ticket. At the time, I was doing it to sort of get ahead. And having other peers that were doing the same intake, same time, and we all sort of pushed each other forward, dragged each other forward. Each of us had strengths and weaknesses. We weren't completing each other's assignments or anything even close to that, but like, you're sharing learning and knowledge. But so one of the things I'll one thing we're going to put on the table as an option for all of our Advice Movement members is to have a facilitated study group. So we're going to do this virtually and maybe even probably virtually and physically. I'm not sure exactly how it'll work, and it'll really be driven by who puts their hand up. And I know one of the fantastic things we've got of having Ali Barr and Grad Mentor on board as our sort of excellence in education partners is that Ali's going to, help out as much as he can with, how to get the most out of a study group and how to do those sorts of things. But I'd be interested in both of your views on what's the best way to construct a study group, and do they work when they're self-driven? So I mean by that two questions. One, does it only really work if it's the same people working through the same course at the same uni? Or have you ever seen instances where it's people doing similar courses from different unis, but maybe they're in the same location? I suppose the first question, what's each of your views on that?
I think probably when you're going through the same unit or the same course, then you've got the same milestones coming along. So it kind of logistically it's more logical to do it in a study group that's studying the same course at the same time, and that to me would make a lot of sense. But what I really liked about what you said then, and thinking back to that, my undergraduate degree was please get degrees, let's get through it, and I had heaps of other things that were more interesting to me than getting my degree. But then going back and doing postgrad was, I was applying it to what I did every day. I got more involved in it. I technically probably knew everything. Well, I probably thought I knew everything I needed to know to do what I needed to do, which is another point. But the richness was in the conversation, the relationships that you built out of that. And we're all business owners. We're all going through the same business issues and margin squeeze, all that sort of longer term stuff. So here just provides another forum to do that. So I speak to people all the time, what's it going to teach me about what I already know? And I really have to bite my tongue and go, well, maybe you'll enjoy some parts. I mean, we're getting forced to do this, but maybe there's an ability to actually get something really positive out of this. And it's not necessarily getting better grades, but just getting through it in a way that actually adds some value to what we do all day, every day. You get some good ideas, you get good connections, you get better groups. So I think there's a lot more value than just this is a study group to get us through a particular unit. I think, the education sort of brings us all together. I think about, you talk about peers and stuff like.
Yeah. So I think there's certainly a value to people in the same unit going through the same stuff. But I used to take my assignments into work when I was a planner, and I used to speak to the other planners about how would you answer this? What have you seen out there? And so I did try and build a broader study group, for lack of a better word, when I was doing my postgrad course in financial planning. And so I would use the techies, I'd use the compliance guys, I'd use the other planners around the office to get input into the assignments and prepare for the exams and things I was doing. So there's benefits to both, I think.
And there's a question here from Daniel around how to actually get some value out of it, and that's what I mean, right? If we just go, I need to do this to tick the box, and I'm not going to learn anything, and why do I have to go back and do it? Like, I think we're missing a really good opportunity. So I would agree. When you're looking, so one of the check boxes when you should look at who you're going to get your education through is who's delivering it, how are they delivering it. So are we doing it digitally? Do we have specialization? Do we have people teaching that content that have practical experience or have practice experience and so forth? Like, who are we learning from? We can get technical updates from pretty much anywhere, from dealer groups and product providers and all that sort of stuff today. But like, what do we want to learn out of it? So I spoke to a life insurance advisor the other day saying, I need that, but I don't want all this other investment stuff. Well, okay, there's things that they're going to have to do, but what is it that you actually want? What's the learning outcome? And I think the learning outcome is who's delivering it, who's got specialties in it, in a component of your advice process that's valuable to you. But I would definitely look at who's behind it, who's providing it. So there's so many options, right? And I think, like, like anything that you do, you need to kind of have what are the most important elements to it and sort of rank those, right? So if you were looking at the 18 different providers of a grad dip or whatever the number's going to be, I'd be setting them up a matrix and going, does it need to have a digital component? Does it need to have a face-to-face delivery from somebody who's from the industry or someone's got a technical expertise? What is that? Can I go to a physical class? Do my clients care about the brand of that particular institution? What's the cost? Like cost, I'm always a big believer that we should put costs aside. But let's say we get 3 or 4 apples with apples, and then the cost comes into it. So what are we paying for it? What are we delivering for it? Can I do it in my own time? Do they have flexibility in the time frames? And then it is, can I put a study group behind it? Who else in my peer group or around me or locally is going to study the similar one, and so forth. So, and I think Ben's just pulling that up now. They've done a whole bunch of work here with some of the providers, not all of the providers. Let's make that clear. There's a lot more there as well. But some of the providers around some of the things that they deliver and how they deliver it. And this is actually perfect, right? So pick a couple of things in there that are important to you: delivery mode, location, if price is not an issue, you know, maybe your dealer group's got some sort of, you know, involvement in that as well, and prioritize that, and then run it over who's going to work with you locally on that, to then get a bit more of a, put science behind your decision is what I'd normally say with any other decision you make.
Yeah, so Ali's right, this is something that the FPA's put together for members, where we've gone out and looked at approved master's degrees at the moment. The graduate diplomas aren't actually approved graduate diplomas at this point, and put together a bit of a matrix, and then there's a little bit more detail under each of them. The biggest thing for me as somebody who went back to uni is this mature age student population. It's good to know that the university support people who are actually working and also studying, and they've got programs and support mechanisms in place to actually help you as somebody who is working in getting through the education component of it.
So what's an example of what that looks like, Ben?
So when I went to Western Sydney and did my commerce degree, we had due dates for assignments, and a lot of universities will be really tight with due dates for assignments, for example. But because we were all working, they actually provided us with a little bit of flexibility there, that we weren't actually penalised. If we let them know that it was going to come in a couple of days or it'd be 2 weeks late, they didn't actually penalise us at that point for getting assignments in late. The other thing is
attendance to lectures, attendance to content.
Yeah. There's that aspect of it too. I was just going to say, I've also got learning difficulties. I've got both ADD and dyslexia, and the other thing that was really important for me in picking university is how they supported me as somebody with learning challenges, and what additional support they gave me. So those are some of the things that universities actually excel at. They're really good at that sort of support mechanism, and so I would prioritise those sort of things. But that's a good point. Attendance at lectures. When I did my undergrad degree, we had a component of our mark that was made up if you actually attended, and you marked your name off the roll. Whereas if you're not interested in actually going into those lectures, or you need a bit more flexibility around your career, you probably don't want to look at universities that's giving you marks based on attendance.
You want to make sure that you can watch the content and engage with the content in your own time. And I think, to your point there, Ben, Eddie just made a comment there that some people like to learn differently, and some people like to get assessed differently. And so whether it's short answer, whether it's essays, whether it's putting SOAs together, whether it's multi-choice, like all of these sort of things, preferences that people might sort of engage with.
Yeah, and so because in that instance, because of my dyslexia in particular, I'm no good at sitting exams. So I'll get close enough to 100% on assignments, but I'll only pass exams. And that's because when I can spend time thinking about it, I can get my ideas out. But when I'm in a rush to get it down, I really struggle. So a university for me that focuses on assignments primarily, SOAs, case studies, written stuff, that's my preference. But most of my other friends, particularly through my undergrad degree, I know they much prefer sitting and doing exams.
Yeah.
You study for it, you go in, you get it done in a 2 to 3 hour block.
Celebrate.
Done. Finished. You don't have to. Yeah, you celebrate. Yeah, that's right. So I think that should be our primary driver. And just to finish off Daniel's point. So for example, Western Sydney, and I'll talk about them a bit.
You do love them.
I am an alumni, and I also lectured out there for a 3-year period, so I've got one in Western Sydney. But they've got challenge exams. So if you're not really focused on how I can broaden my knowledge and experience, and I just want to get through it quickly, Western Sydney's actually got options there for you that you can get. You can do an exam. If you pass it, then you get the credit for the units, and that's all fine and stuff. But if you want to sit down and actually learn something and get more out of it, then you might have to choose a different uni.
So I think this goes back to like choosing who you're choosing for what you're trying to achieve. And if you just want to learn at your own pace, if you want to fast track through it, do you have to sit there and wait for the content to come out every single week, or can you binge it like you do Netflix?
Yeah.
And you might have that. You might have 2-week holiday, and you just go, can I binge 1 unit in a week of that? And is that important to you? And do you like to do that too, right? And do you need a study group? So I think it's each with itself, but by having a matrix and thought around, will they deliver it flexibly? Will they, treat you? Will understand. And I think as we all get older, we also like to do things different ways, and we have our own little quirks too. I think a lot of young people kind of come in and they rote learn and so forth, but we all have different ways we like to learn.
Yeah.
And that's important, and looking at who's going to have flexibility around that. But I think most of these ones here, if I have a look at this, and I haven't had a good look at this in detail, I can't scroll that. I was trying to scroll.
Let me put that out for you, Alex.
Thanks, mate. A lot of them have a lot of flexibility more and more these days. So also just don't just assume because they're a hallmark university with big campuses that they don't provide digital solutions as well. So just make sure that you look into.
Yeah,
I mean, the world's changing, right?
A lot of online delivery there. You can also, for those of you who are FBA members, you can actually click in and get a bit more information about all sorts of policies and procedures and information on the way they.
And most of them also have a very, very good study support.
Yeah.
And making sure that but because back to school is such a big thing, not just in this industry, right? Ongoing education is not going away anywhere. I think there's a lot of industries have more education. There's a lot of support in these universities, and that's how they differentiate. And and non-universities like a Kaplan and that, they have a lot of support around flexible learning and how to get your learning expertise up if you haven't done it for a while.
One of the questions I got, and I know, I think Dan just asked if any of the grad dips have been approved yet, and I think Ben, you said before, no, not yet, but they're not too far away.
Is it 8? Didn't they open up this week, firstly, and say submissions can start now and it'll be an 8-week turnaround?
Yeah.
I read that on Monday.
No, that's right. The framework to actually get approval for both bridging courses and graduate diplomas was only released this week. I know there were some universities going through earlier trials, but I actually think they're not going to announce everything until they've got them all.
I reckon there was,
anyway.
On Monday there was 18 emails sent with here's our submission. All universities would have them ready to go.
Yeah, I think so. The criteria was sort of out there and ready to go anyway, so it's just the approval.
So question.
So in 8 weeks.
Okay. Yeah. So so it looks like that's a brilliant bloody little matrix, mate. If you didn't put that together personally, I'd be claiming full credit for that, because that thing looks amazing. And it makes it so much easier for advisors to look at it and go, okay, righto, there's a few things in there a few options that I've got. It's not just the most expensive, it's not just the cheapest, it's so much more to it than that. And I think there's a role that, I don't know, I think the fear for a lot of advisors is they're going to get left to do this by themselves. I don't know if you guys get a sense of that. Like, as much as the industry's pulling together and we're all trying to be there, at the end of the day, they're the ones that have got to front up, do it. And there's two parts to my extended question. One, which is an element of, I shouldn't have to bloody do this. Like, it's not my fault that I'm here. And because of that, I think that's evidenced by what I'm just going to call, shout out to Daniel, Eddie and Tony for joining us on the call. This is quite literally the poorest physical turnout we've had to a webinar ever. Good registration numbers, but in relative, this is normally you get about 50% of people that register for a webinar turning up. We've had less than 10%. Now, I don't think that is a personal slight on you, good sirs.
I was just saying where you were going with this. Oh my God.
And I don't think it's me. I think it is two things. One, I think the industry en masse is a little bit pissed, to put it mildly, at where we've ended up. And I think because of that, they're just gone, well, stuff it. I'm not going to entertain this conversation because I still don't feel like I should bloody well be having it. And two, the other part is I think there's a big element of head in the sand going, I still got till 2024. I don't really know how to do it. If I'm brutally honest, I'm shit scared about going back and failing and having someone judge me and tell me I'm not good enough to be an advisor anymore. And I think there's a huge chunk of advisors out there that are just head in the sand. So for me, as much as I'm is trying to wrap around this, I think collectively my question now to you boys is, how do we overcome those two things? Because the first thing is, if we don't get collectively the industry, the advisors in the industry, the profession that they want to be, to go, we have to do this and we have to start soon. Or look, we might not have created it, but it's ours and we've got to do it. And then the second part is, how do we stop them from leaving it so late in the game, as advisors are notorious for doing, as we see at the mad
Humans
rush.
are notorious for doing.
All right. So you've got unis are late in the game and they won't care. They'll just leave it because at the end of the day, they're getting paid. I'm sure they've got a measurement around completion and all that sort of stuff as well. But ask Kaplan to give you some data around what their CPD library logins look like on the 29th and 30th of June. And that'll give you a real indication as to the advisor force's traditional view to how and when you get education done. We can't do that this time, boys. So how do we collectively help advisors accept where we are and pull their bloody fingers out and get moving on this thing? Obviously, given what you've said, Benji, which is hold your horses for a little bit. Let's make sure you know what you're doing. But I would love it to be that as soon as that door opens and they know which door they can walk through and which uni they can walk through, that they're off and running.
Yeah, so I've got two comments to make on that. Number one, I think there are a lot of people who are wanting to get the exam done and out of the way first, and given that's got the shorter time frame, I think that's right. And we're starting to get a lot of frustration that there's not information on the exam, there's no practice exams yet, there's no reading material available yet, when it should just be linked to legislation. It's not difficult, but there's a bit of frustration about that. The other thing is, yesterday I was asked the question on how has this thing progressed, and I think this is part of the frustration and annoyance and confusion. And there'll be some people who have just totally switched off because of this, but there'll be another group of people that have gone, oh, actually, it's not as bad. The first proposal that came out in December 2017, 90% of our members were going to need to do a graduate diploma. By the time the second proposal came out in March, only about 50% of our members would need to do a graduate diploma. And today, based on what I showed you before, there's only about 10 to 15% of our members that are actually going to need to do up to 8 units of study, and most of them will actually be able to do at most 6. So there has been a significant improvement in the amount of study that most people do, in that we went from basically 90% having to do 8 units of study down to about 15, and it's probably going to end up being like less than 10% will actually need to do 8 units of study. So most people are actually in a pretty good position. And to that point, around 50 to 60% of our members are actually only going to need to do one unit of study. So most of them have degrees, most of them have done enough additional study through CFPs and ADFPs and things that are actually only going to need to do 1 unit, maybe 3. There is time to leave it a little bit in the context of that. But I think you're right, people have kind of just switched off on this thing. Did you want to add anything?
Oh, look, I agree with that, but I reckon human nature is it's not an advisor thing, Steve. It's human nature. Like on my high school assignment, that was done the night before. It's always happened, right? So I think everybody, there's a human nature to leave things like Brussels sprouts to the end of the meal. So that's one component. So, but then obviously the certain.
Are you saying I'm normal procrastinating on everything?
Yeah, well, I mean, well, there's some commonalities to it. So, but also like this week they said, oh, well, no, it's going to be 8 weeks before we know what to study. So that was it. Now you've just come out here and shown us some numbers and some tools that we can put in there to say, well, I only need to do 1 or 2. I was reading through that stuff and your 4 dots there, and it looked like some of those things would sort of add up to, well, we've only got one thing to do. So, and because there's not much clarity on it, I think people are probably sitting there going, well, now we've been given, to me, reading it on Monday, that note about the approval of those grad diplomas, I sort of thought, well, nothing's going to happen for 8 weeks now. That's where I went, and so I assumed that anyone else reading that who's engaging in it is going, oh, well, at least we have a date. I assume we're going to get a flood of approvals in 8 weeks' time.
Well, the problem is it's at least 8 weeks because they actually have to be approved at some point, which means they've got to go to a board meeting. The legislative instrument's got to be
on day. Go on longer. I can't go on longer.
No, well, it's going to go longer.
Well, that's just a grad process
that we got there.
But then if there's only 1 or 2 units for most people, then it's not. So maybe this has just dragged on, and people are getting a little bit more, well, not comfortable, but they're not so worried about not getting it done in time. Like, I don't know how many people are going to have to go through and do 8 units in 12 months and rush through it, Steve. I'm not sure, but by the numbers that Ben says, it's not going to be that many.
No, yeah, my gut instinct is that the real number lands somewhere in between Benji's FPA members and probably the 4-unit mob. Guys, I'm conscious of time as well. We've only got a few minutes left, and I know there's a couple of questions that will need to be asked as well. Before I do get to Q&A though, right, so we know we've got some stuff to do. It looks like there's a fantastic little resource that FPA's put together there. Clear plug for that.
I just wanted to point out as well, if you're not sure how much study you need to do, we do have this Find Your Education Pathway tool as well that you just answer a couple of simple questions.
Oh, is this me doing my live?
If you want to, Steve.
Sure.
So it says, are you an existing advisor, Steve?
Yes.
Good. All right. Do you have an academic degree?
No.
We've defined there what an academic degree is.
No.
All right.
What
about from the School of Hard Knocks? Does that count?
No, unfortunately not.
Have you got a piece of paper?
And I will say we pushed for it, but have you completed an advanced diploma?
Yes.
Have you? So this one's not designed for you, obviously, Steve. It's more designed for our members. But have you completed a?
I knew you were prejudiced against me. No, you know I bloody haven't. Don't ask.
No, but you've done the fellow chartered.
I have. I've done the pre-2016 version though, so I'm not sure how that'll go.
But I'm gonna call that a yes. So if you have done an approved certification, we're gonna call that a yes.
Sure.
And so we do this. We've got this nice little certificate here that says
I'll pass. I'm finished.
4 units, Steve. And so this is something that licensees have told us that you can take to them and say, we've gone through this process and this is what the FPA says I've got left to do. And most of the licensees are going, awesome, now we can help support you study through that process.
That's great.
So you're going to give me the link to that, aren't you, Benj? And I'll share that with everybody in when I send the recording out. Or do you have to be an FPA member to be able to use that little tool?
You do. That's a great reason to be an FPA member.
Oh, look at that! All right, he's going to give me a link through, and I'll post it in there. And if you hit the FPA firewall, I'm sure there'll be a lovely membership person there that will have a chat to you about that and many other benefits of FPA membership. What other stuff where to from here, boys? So I know everyone's probably going to start to think about, the exam that's coming up. They're going to sit on their hands, rightly so, until we know exactly what the heck we're going to have to do. I know there was a question before about, how many of these challenge sort of exams can you do to try and cut stuff out? So I can imagine that the most prudent approach from the degree or the further education point of view will be hold your horses, know exactly what you're dealing with, and then go hard. Obviously, we've got the exam coming up. What's your counsel, both of you, in terms of how to advise, especially solo practitioners or newish entrants? They're not completely new, but they've been around long enough to be an existing advisor, and they're probably going to have to do a little bit more work. Where should they go? Like, are either of you offering? Do you know of any support groups, or is there communities, or apart from obviously the advice movement?
I think you're on the mark there, mate.
What should they be doing? Maybe from a licensee point of view, what should they be asking from their licensees now? Given licensees are going to play a very heavy-handed role in terms of ongoing monitoring and measurement and CPD as well and other stuff. What should they be asking from their licensees?
So to your point before and getting prepared and not waiting until the last minute, I think now is the time to, there are a lot of universities that have financial planning courses that have master's programs already that will try to develop advanced diplomas to get those approved. But you can spend now learning about the universities, figuring out which ones are offering types of courses that are going to suit your learning style, suit your assessment style, that are going to have the right sort of support for you, that work in the right sort of time frames, that you understand the costs. And to your point, Steve, start having those conversations with your licensee and say, I'm going to need to do 4 units of study. What support are you going to provide me? I know when I was doing my master's, my employer per subject gave me 3 days of study leave and 1 exam day. So an additional 4 days of effectively leave. To support me doing that per unit. And so if I did 2 units a semester, I had an extra, 8 days of study leave there that I could use each semester. I was lucky that they paid for 100% of my master's, but some are offering 50%, some are offering 10%. I think now's the time to figure out which university you might prefer to go to. Because it will support you the right way and what support you're going to get from your licensee. By the time you got all that figured out, we should have approved courses, I would hope.
Yeah, I reckon that's probably it. And I would look at your learning module before sort of going and researching the university. Just work out what's the most important stuff, because the university will fall in as the natural outcome of the right one to choose. And then, talk about your peer support groups or your professional development groups in your state or your region with your or the other people that we would be really, really helpful with it are your product providers too. I know that Zurich and these sort of people are coming out with some support around that, so they'll know people in your local community who are studying and going down the same thinking path. So get together, and when you're all sitting there going, okay, which of the 3 do we choose, maybe the decision's made by that peer group that you're going to join.
Well, I think one of the things we're going to put on the table from today, as I said, I'll send the 2 poll questions that Ben and Ali had, and send it around to everybody. So Daniel, Eddie, and Tony, you guys can have first crack at putting your answers in there. I think the advice movement, small but growing community, we're going to get around and support each other. So I think one of the things I'm going to put in that survey is also, would you value, I think a facilitated study group could be something of real value. And I've always known that peer groups, and we've seen this across the industry, not just in study-related peer groups, but any sort of advisor or business-related peer group, you get a really good self-driven and motivated group, it works really, really well. But if it's not, it tends to fall over, or you get one person, usually this bloke, that wants to dominate the conversation and never shuts up. And there's not a lot of shared learning going on. It's just a soapbox that someone else gets up on. And so it could be the No Steve study group. That could be the thing that we want to do. How do I join the one that he's not in? But I think what I've found works really well is where you do have that facilitated, almost that neutral coach that goes, guys, I don't give a shit how you get through this. You just got to get through it. Like, this is not about ego stroking and any of that sort of stuff anymore. This is, you got a job. How do you all work together, move forward? So we'll ask the family what they think on this, and hopefully our friends at the FPA and Grad Mentor might be able to put a bit of a helping hand in there every now and then, and help all of us get to where we want to get to, which is legit. Totes legit in 2024, and once we get past that exam in 2019. But guys, thank you so much for your time and your contribution. Daniel, Eddie, Tony, thanks for keeping this thing interesting and giving us questions along the way. And you guys will send me some links that I can put in the replay up on the YouTube channel, which is where most of you are watching now, because we know you didn't bloody turn up. But anyway, it's all right. I'm happy with that. Have a fantastic weekend.
Sorry to like that, Steve.
It was Ben. Must have been Ben.
It's always Ben.
Thank you, boys, so much for today. It was a great call, and I look forward to seeing each of you very soon.
Cheers, mate.
See you, mate.
Bye, guys. Bye, everyone.